I think that there's a way to do both. I think we have to let people know about the urgency, about all the facts, the data that show we are in deep doo-doo, really, but also show what's possible, and not just someday, what people are doing today. The whole key is to scale it and amplify, scale and amplify.
This is Andy Revkin. This is Sustain What, where I try to kind of generate some sense of progress amid complexity. So I'm going to bring in Betsy, who got started in the 90s on this journey of trying to engage people on both the problems related to climate and solutions in radio at CBS, and then onward through a bunch of different platforms. Hey, Betsy, also in California, right?
Good morning, both of you. So happy to join you. I hope you don't mind if I sip on my caffeine. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wake up and smell the carbon.
Yeah. So I thought, let's take a quick dark dive into why each of you found the sort of mainstream broadcast medium so frustrating.
Thank you. Well, in a thumbnail, my goodness, 29 years this Earth Day. I'll do my best.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, really. Lot to say. Working on a book, but in the meantime, things are in flux. Let's see. As a kid, people say, how'd you get this way, Betsy? Why are you so green? Was it the way you were raised? I said, no, but in third grade, it bothered me that my fellow students were throwing their lunches away. Go figure. I had like a green, I call it an extra green chromosome, or W chromosome, for waste prevention. I just didn't like waste. It seemed wrong to throw away good food. I grew up to find out not everybody has that obsession. And that's where it began, I guess. And then it was quite, recessed. It was recessed. And then it kind of blew up when I got married. My husband, who's from New York, I'm from the Bay Area. We will welcome you here happily, Chase, Northern California. He was shaping and wasting water and brushing his teeth, and the water was running down the drain. And I grew up with droughts. He did not. And I did my and after a year of operant conditioning, I was a psych major. He says brainwashing. He said, okay, I get it now. I've changed. I take the, wire hangers back to the dry cleaners. He's a lawyer. I do double-sided, copying when I do briefs, but I'm only one guy. It's a big landfill. Why don't you go be the Martha Stewart of trash? Boy, does he regret that. So I started Trash Talk Minutes, Earth Day 1997. Boy, does that make me feel old. I was young when I started. My daughter was 2. My granddaughter is 2 now. Yeah, here they are, right here.
Lord.
Yeah, there's a reason. Well, the reasons I do this, for every child to be, every grandchild, every niece, every nephew, everybody to come. It's so not fair what we're doing. But I digress. So my news director figured I'd have 3 weeks worth of waste prevention tips: reduce, reuse, recycle, rot. 10 years later, I retired Trash Talk, but midway through, I changed the name and the focus to Eco Talk, because I went from garbage to global warming. Oh my God, this is much scarier. Right about that time, Air America came along. It was a liberal, one of the few liberal progressive radio networks out there. Rachel Maddow was on. One of us went on to TV fame and fortune. Al Franken, quite a few other notables. And the progressives charged me to do my show Eco Talk, but it was a 1-hour program, 3 to 4 interviews, so 15, 20 minutes each. I never had, and I have to the day, not have any trouble coming up with story ideas with guests. So 2.5 years went weekly and then daily. Then they went bankrupt, taking my significant investment with them. But I knew too much to quit. So did internet radio for about 9 years. And then along came greentv.com, a guy who had a great URL, was looking for content. I was a content creator looking for a good platform. I had resisted going online because I said, I'm just going to reach the choir. I've always wanted to reach, we need to reach beyond the choir, right? And because the internet is more self-selecting. So I tried like heck to get Chase's dream job. Thank you, Chase, for telling me why. I'm sure I would have ended up myself, if not getting fired for being too honest. And I pitched, Jeff Zucker at CNN. I could tell you all the names that I went to, and they all had some excuse for why they couldn't do it. Our viewers aren't interested. Doesn't poll well. Well, since when is the news based on popularity? And you think people really want to hear about bombed, school children? What Chase said, especially in that video, I love everything you said. I can't tell you how many people sent it to me, Chase, and said, he's channeling you, Betsy. He's channeling you. You've got to reach out to this guy. I said, we met on a river rafting trip in the middle of an awful fire in Sun Valley, Idaho.
We'll not forget that day. We were at a climate conference in the Sun Valley Forum in Idaho, and it was, kind of the last day, adventure day of like, let's get outside and enjoy nature and this beautiful river and go rafting. And we're driving up there, and there's a huge wildfire burning. And I've covered plenty of wildfires, and so I recognize, like, I don't know if this is going to be a good idea for us to be out breathing this air. And so, like, I just felt like the irony of us trying to be outside and enjoying nature at a climate conference when there's a major wildfire burning was just deep irony.
We got back to the hotel. It was like 88, 89 degrees outside, smoky as heck. They had a fire going in the gas fireplace,
Right.
which I've seen a lot in the middle of summer. And I've complained to the hotel or the restaurant manager. I said, why do you have this on? Ambiance. I said, do me a favor, turn it off for a week and see if anyone complains. It's hot, it's smoky. Here at a climate conference where people were staying, they had a fire burning. It's like, what's wrong with this picture, right? The disconnect. So that's a bit of my story.
Now one thing that comes up, and actually Joe Whitty, who's a longtime meteorologist, he was at NBC. Actually, he's in the comments here. Sort of goes back to what Andy has talked about, finding space in the paper or on the TV screen for slow moving and invisible threat.
I've never seen it as invisible or incremental. It's, I guess, an Eskimo sees, all kinds of snowflakes. I see climate change wherever I go, and not just climate, oceans. There's, what's going on with, wildlife and plastic pollution and everything. And it just has been mind-boggling, mind-bending that my former broadcast news industry does not see the potential to tell the most interesting, important news. And when Jeff Zucker famously was asked, why don't you do more climate coverage? That was about 10 years ago. That's when I started harassing him. He said, well, we know we should do more. We just don't know how to make it interesting. Well, I do. I've done at that point about 3,000 interviews on it. You just don't know where to look. You don't know how to connect the dots. You don't know how to focus on the gazillions of solutions and solutionaries. And guess what? We will never run short of challenges, never run out of solutions, and never run out of people, as you say, who are doing this incredible work that people don't know about. And now that people are finding out about our planetary pickle, they're giving up. It's too late. No, it's not. You just got to listen to what's going on and join us. We need you, and you'll feel better.
Do the media companies now think they have to wait for a disaster to report on climate change based on what Andy just said?
And people have said to me over the years, Betsy, people are not going to pay attention till there's a crisis, till there's a disaster. I said, which one do you want to talk about? They're happening every day, more and more and faster than climate scientists had predicted, which is the scary part. The dots are not being connected. And if they were, here's my question to you guys, rhetorical maybe, but I wonder if more Americans, let's just stick with our country, knew what we know, which is too much, right? And they could sleep less a night, we could sleep more. Do you think that we would see, an uprising? That's what I wonder. Or are we just psychologically so, tuned to tune out? Ignorance is a really bad reason to lose a perfectly good planet. And that's why I've been tireless, dogged, so committed I may end up committed, trying to get back on a mainstream platform. Because when I was on CBS Network, people across the country heard me. My cousins I went to high school with, but it wasn't meaningful to me after a few years. This is important, and we need to broadcast it. And now the broadcast networks are dying anyway, but the planet's dying faster. The glaciers are melting faster. I swear to God, I've been to probably 300 green conferences, from zero waste back in 1997 when I started Trash Talk to zero emissions. There's one thing that 100% of the time I notice. That is, the people there are the most positive, upbeat, alive people I know. Why? Because they have a secret that they don't want to be a secret. They know what's going on. They're up to the solutions. They're the solutionaries by definition of them being there. And I said, people are walking around looking glum. There's plenty of reason for that. But we're not depressed and angry. Well, we are, but not most of the time. Most of the time, you were like Chase. I'm sure you've been to other climate gatherings. At the one in Sun Valley, people there have a sense of purpose. And when people say, you don't look your age, you can't be a grandmother, I say passion and purpose. Join us. We need you. Really. And the research is starting to show that, the medical research. One of the keys to longevity is have a reason to get up every day. And what I just want to say is, it's not just climate change, climate being the mother of all eco challenges, the great exacerbator. You got to chunk it down into sound bites. And that's why I've managed to do 5,000 interviews on all shades of green, and I've never run out. I've got 10 I would love to do this week, including you, Chase. I think that there's a way to do both. I think we have to let people know about the urgency, about all the facts, the data that show we are in deep doo-doo, really, but also show what's possible, and not just someday, what people are doing today. The whole key is to scale it and amplify, scale and amplify. I pitched the Today Show, during Climate Week in New York. They said, well, can you dumb it down? We've got to be chipper in the morning. But we haven't mentioned Fox. I really believe that Fox News, as I say, is a big reason for, the disinformation. It's not by accident. I've been on Hannity more than a dozen times, and Tucker Carlson. When I dared mention that humans are part of nature, I got death threats, talking 15 years ago. So when I hear about people getting death threats, they're crazy. They really are, because I mentioned something that is a fact. They're still lying about climate change, Fox is. How did they get away with that? I say it's getting away with murder, because people are dying from climate change, and people may not evacuate during a huge fire or flood because they've been in that place for so long and they never got the floods and fires, never got that bad, or the storms. Now it's weather on steroids, and they don't evacuate. And I'm so obsessed. I take recordings of people who have lost family members or property because they didn't evacuate, because here's the signature of climate change. We've never seen anything like this before. And I take notes. So I want to do a public action lawsuit public interest lawsuit, go back and interview all these people. Did you get your news primarily from Fox? If so, did you think it was just a big hoax? Might you have evacuated sooner had you known the truth? And I'm driving around in my EV hearing about people are up in arms about the price of gas. There are almost affordable EVs right now, and we wouldn't have these wars when they went into Iraq. Some of us were on the streets protesting, knowing there was probably no weapons of mass destruction, but there was oil. You lose the memory, so that my daughter will never know what I grew up with running around. I grew up in a walnut orchard in Santa Clara Valley, now Silicon Valley. There was a creek, and we would watch the tadpoles turn into little baby frogs in the spring. That's not there anymore. Just running around till after dark, till dinner's ready. She went to camp, luckily, in Maine. But otherwise, she didn't do that. And so she won't miss what I miss. And her daughter won't miss what, maybe going to camp in Maine. Maybe those options won't be there by the time my granddaughter grows up. That is a scary thought, that to not even know what was, or to what we're fighting for. And with each successive generation, we lose more of that memory. The question is really, how do we love our kids, country, and planet? And I've repeated that many times.
That's a good one.
And I'll add grandkids. Here's my idea. What do you think? The ABCs of our environmental future: newspaper, radio, and TV. Andy, Betsy, Chase on YouTube.
We're doing that right now.
Wow, that's interesting.
If we're doing forces, we can get out there big time. I'm an environmental media pioneer, but I'm a social media putz. I suck at that. So maybe together.
You're onto something really important that I want to just, maybe we can close out in the next couple of minutes with. The thing that you mentioned is the idea of collaborative approaches to communication. When I started my blog when I was at the New York Times, called .earth, in 2007, from 2007 to about 2014, the blogosphere around these issues, David Roberts and me and others, was very collaborative. It was a lot of cross connecting. Even when we were arguing, there was a lot of, I would say, well, David Roberts just said this about, or Joe Rahm over in his special place. But we were connecting to each other. We were engaging. We were highlighting each other's work. It was a networked approach to communication, and then it eroded, and that went away. Now I think it's partially because everyone's so desperate to maintain time on site, which is one of those metrics or whatever. People don't click. They don't link out, and unfortunately, like on Substack, I look at the data. Hardly any readers click on links. I loved, as a blogger, infusing my articles with links to all the background context, but in the world we're in now, maybe it's because everyone's in a hurry, no one's actually digging in further. But the collaborative potential is absolutely there. I on my Substack, I'm doing a whole series called Other Voices, because these issues are way too big for one perspective and one specialty. So the more we can keep in touch with each other about when you're doing something new, making sure others know about it, other media, other communicators, the better off I think we'll all be.
I just saw this morning, Jane Fonda is doing a musical on climate change on Earth Day.
I saw that.
I checked that out. I had to get out of bed, so I couldn't see all the details, but that will draw some attention. But you shouldn't have to be Jane Fonda. That was the other thing. When I would go to networks, they said, well, if you can bring me a celebrity to co-host. Well,
Yeah.
Mark Ruffalo said he would be a guest co-host on my, would-be show. But guess what? They're actors. They're celebrities. They're not going to do a weekly or daily show. And so it was always a catch-22 when I went to pitch them. And you mentioned, Joe Rome, David Roberts, I interviewed them 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. That should matter to a network, that kind of experience. And I think they were afraid of somebody who knew too much. I kind of got that unofficial feedback that they don't want somebody who will actually talk about it as plainly as we're talking about it here. So shame on them. I'm working on a book called Climate Collusion, all about dereliction of duty, media malpractice. They are a big part of the problem. And in the absence, in the void of proper coverage, Fox all along, night and day, television and radio, has been saying it's a big hoax. And if people don't believe that's a problem, we have a dinosaur in chief 2.0. And if he can stand up in front of the UN in the middle of Climate Week, when there's thousands of us climate experts running around Manhattan, and say it's a big hoax, green scam, biggest hoax ever perpetrated against men. WTF? We have an eco-illiteracy crisis, folks, and it is costing us every day. And voting is the most important thing. But if we don't bring the public along, if we don't educate and engage the greater public, we will not win. I bet my life on it because I have, and a lot of money too. We're seeing the ugly underbelly of what's wrong with America, greed, power, money, ignoring our beautiful planet. And I have to think there'll be a backlash to that, and that better times will emerge, better programming will emerge.
Yeah.
Go to at Betsy Rosenberg Interviews. By the way, the full name of my program, my series, whatever Chase you will like, because it's Code Green, Conversations for a Future We Want and Our Kids Deserve. That's what it's all about. I have always focused on the positive. Even Trash Talk, 1997, Sound Solutions for a Healthier Planet and People. On Air America, Greening the Red and Blue States, one show at a time.
Yeah.
That's the key. And last thought, when people say, what do you mean more coverage? I hear a lot about climate change. I said, imagine if CNN, MSNBC, for starters, covered climate like they did COVID, a true emergency, life and death. The whole world changed almost overnight, changed behavior. This is bigger. More people have and will die from climate-related events. And that's what we need. That we were going to start a Green News Network. If anybody wants to do that, 24/7, we will never run out of stories. I promise.
The more diverse we are in our voices, the more respectful we are about the possibility of having cogent, constructive conversations with people across those divides that the Fox folks love to amplify, the better off we'll all be going forward.
We lived in Texas Hill Country, an hour's drive from where those awful floods happened July 4th, all those young children, girls killed. Here's the problem with not talking about it. People would say, well, this is an area of flash floods, so we've been through them before, okay? Well, here's people in Texas, for the most part, don't talk about climate change. I wonder if the people who were in charge of that camp had consciousness that it's weather on steroids. This flash flood may be worse than the others because of, our emissions, okay? They might not have put 7-year-olds right along the riverbank. That's the problem with not talking about it and being aware of it and having it be direct. And that's why I think there's absolutely a need to do that. And of course, none of the Rick Abbott, all the way Ted Cruz, they never once mentioned climate change. And then Trump showing up, the nerve, while he's rolling back our climate protections and regulation, hard fought. The hypocrisy has got to stop.